Thomas Rivera kept his wife's sketchbooks on a shelf above his workbench. There were 7 of them, and they were the most valuable things he owned. She had drawn in them for 28 years. She had drawn before they were married. During the years when she worked as an automotive engineer at a design firm. She had drawn during the years when she was pregnant with Isabella, when she was pregnant with Marcus, when she was home raising 2 children and being the person their family needed her to be. She had drawn during the quiet evenings when the kids were asleep and Thomas was working late, designing engine components for companies that would put his work in vehicles that drove millions of miles, carried millions of people, solved millions of problems. Elena had also been designing engines, but her engines existed only in the sketchbooks. Her name was Elena Maria Santos Rivera, and she had been dead for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Thomas counted the time the way grief-stricken people do, not to torture himself, but because the counting felt like attention, like honor, like a form of presence. 3 years earlier, she had been driving on the interstate. Another driver, texting, had crossed the center line. Elena had been doing everything right, both hands on the wheel. Eyes on the road, no music, no distractions. It did not matter. The other car came at 65 miles per hour, and Elena's car could not get out of the way fast enough. Thomas had been in the garage when the police came to his door. He had thought, in the first moment, that it was something about the kids. Then the officer said the word, and the word was accident. And after that, all the words disappeared for a very long time. Now, 3 years later, Thomas had begun rebuilding his wife's engines. He did not know if they would work. He did not know if her designs, beautiful as they were in the sketchbooks, would translate from paper to metal, from imagination to function, but he was going to find out. Because his wife had spent 28 years designing brilliance, and the world did not know it. And that could not be the end of the story. The garage behind their house was a small space, 12 feet by 15 feet, concrete floor, fluorescent lights from the 1,970 seconds that hummed during the day and created a particular kind of white light that made everything look temporary. But it was not temporary. It was permanent. It was the space where Thomas had worked for 19 years, first as a contract engineer, then as a man who fixed other people's designs because his own designs were good but not visionary, competent but not revolutionary. His wife's designs had been revolutionary. Thomas was 44 years old. He had the appearance of a man who had been broken and who had decided not to fully repair himself. His hair was beginning to gray at the temples. He had not shaved that morning. He had not shaved most mornings. Since Elena died, though he would occasionally shave on Saturdays, more out of routine than concern, he wore the same brand of work shirt he had worn for 15 years. Dickies, blue, durable. The shirt had small burns on the sleeve, where welding sparks had landed and cooled. There was a grease stain on the pocket that would not come out, despite Isabella's attempts at laundry. Isabella was 15 years old. She had her mother's hands, long-fingered, precise, made for detail work. She had her father's quietness, the ability to be in a room and not fill it with sound. She was sitting at a workbench, studying one of Elena's sketchbooks, running her finger along the lines of an engine design that had never been built. "This one," Isabella said, pointing. "This is the one you're rebuilding." "Yes," Thomas said, "this is the one." The sketchbook was open to a page dated the 14th of March, 2003. 21 years ago. The design was for an engine with a revolutionary valve timing system. Elena had drawn it in pencil, then gone over it in ink. She had labeled every component in her precise handwriting. She had included notes in the margins, thoughts, revisions, alternate configurations, the work of a mind that was thinking, always designing. In the margins of that page, Elena had written, "If this works, everything changes." V, her initial. The private shorthand she used when she was talking to her future self, to the imagined future where her designs would matter. Thomas had looked at that notation 1,000 times since her death. He had wondered if she was right. If this design, if it could be built, if it could run, would it change everything? Would it be the engine that should have launched her career 30 years ago? Would it be the work that proved she had been right to keep designing, even when the world told her to be satisfied with raising children, with being a wife, with being content in the spaces she was allowed to occupy? "Let's build it," Isabella said. She said it the way she said most things, as a statement of fact rather than a question. Thomas looked at his daughter. She had been 8 years old when Elena died. She had cried at the funeral. She had not cried much since, but she had begun spending time in the garage, studying the sketchbooks, asking Thomas questions about the designs. She had begun inheriting her mother's obsession. "We'll need 3 months," Thomas said, "maybe 4. "I don't have anything else to do," Isabella said. She meant it. The implication was clear. This was more important than homework, than friends, than anything else. Her 15-year-old self should have been prioritizing. This was honoring her mother. Thomas nodded. He walked to the shelf where the sketchbooks lived. He took down the one dated 2003. He opened it to the page marked the 14th of March. He looked at Elena's handwriting, at her drawings, at the engine that existed only in her imagination and in the grief-stricken determination of the people who loved her. "Let's build it," he said, echoing his daughter. The first month of rebuilding Elena's engine was about translation, taking what existed on paper and finding the metal equivalents. Thomas ordered materials. He began machining components. The process required precision that felt meditative. Each measurement, each cut, each assembly brought him closer to understanding what his wife had imagined. Isabella worked beside him. She learned to read the technical drawings. She learned which tools corresponded to which tasks. She learned the language of engineering that her mother had spoken fluently, and that Isabella was beginning to understand viscerally, not just intellectually. There was a particular evening, 2 months into the project, when Isabella asked a question that suggested she understood something fundamental. "Did Mom know this would never get built?" Isabella asked. Thomas was at the workbench, fitting a valve assembly. He did not answer immediately. He set down his tools. He turned to face his daughter. "I don't know," he said. "I think she knew the odds were against it. She left the industry because it was too hard to fight while also being a mother. But I think she also believed that eventually, someday, her work might matter." "But she ran out of time," Isabella said. "It was not a question. Yes. That's not fair." "No," Thomas agreed. "It's not." Isabella returned to the drawings. She did not cry. This was her way of processing through work, through focus, through the continuation of her mother's unfinished projects. There were flashbacks not to Thomas and Isabella's conscious awareness, but embedded in the scene, in the moment when Thomas looked at the workbench, and for a second he could see Elena there, younger, drawing with the same precision that he was now using to build. She had been right there, night after night, creating brilliance that the world would never see because she had made a choice to be home, to raise children, to prioritize her family over her ambition. Thomas had never blamed her for that choice. He had loved her for it. But he had also carried the knowledge that the choice had cost the world something. It had cost the full expression of her genius. It had cost the recognition that should have been hers. By month 3, the engine was 80% complete. Thomas was working on the most complex part, the valve timing mechanism, the system that Elena had designed that no one had ever built before, that might or might not actually work in practice, the way it worked in theory. He was welding a precision component when Isabella brought him something. She had gone through all 7 sketchbooks and compiled a document. Notes from all of Elena's designs, organized by date, showing the evolution of her thinking, the development of her ideas. It was a technical genealogy of her genius. "For documentation," Isabella said, handing it to him. "When we tell people about this." Thomas took the document. He looked at his daughter, at the work she had done, at the way she was already thinking about her mother's legacy as something that needed to be documented, protected, honored. "You're a lot like her," he said. "I know," Isabella said. "That's why we have to finish this." Month 4 arrived with the completed engine. It was a beautiful thing to look at. Metal components fitted with precision. The valve timing system, Elena's revolutionary design, assembled exactly as she had drawn it. Every bolt, every gasket, every moving part was in place. Theoretical engineering had become physical reality. But theory and practice are not always the same thing. Thomas installed the engine in a test apparatus. The apparatus would allow him to run the engine without actually putting it in a vehicle, a safety precaution. A way to verify function before risking anything important. Isabella watched from beside him. They did not speak. They had learned to work in silence, the way Elena had worked. The way grief-stricken people communicate, through attention, through presence, through the focus of people honoring something larger than themselves. Thomas started the engine. It turned over. The cylinders fired. The valve timing system engaged, smoothly, perfectly. Exactly as Elena had drawn it, the engine ran. It ran clean. It ran efficiently. The revolutions per minute in Ute climbed steadily. The system performed flawlessly. And after 15 minutes of perfect operation, Thomas shut it down. The engine had worked. For a moment, just a moment, neither father nor daughter moved. They stood in the garage, and they understood that Elena had been right. Her design, created 21 years ago in a sketchbook during the quiet evenings of her life, had worked. The vision had been accurate. The engineering had been sound. The genius had been real. Isabella began to cry, not the measured tears of grief, but the sudden release of years of managed sorrow. Thomas put his arm around his daughter, and they stood together in the garage where Elena had never been, honoring the work that she had done, the legacy that she had left, the proof that she had been brilliant. She was so smart, Dad, Isabella said. Yes, Thomas said, she was. The world should know. Thomas held his daughter and understood that this was the moment where his private grief transformed into public action. Elena's work had been proven. Her designs were revolutionary. Her genius was undeniable. The secret could not remain a secret anymore. Okay, Thomas said. Let's tell them. Thomas built a video demonstrating the engine. Clear cinematography, technical detail, engineering specifications, performance metrics. The video showed the completed engine, the components, the revolutionary valve timing system. The proof of concept. It was professional, without being flashy. It was the kind of video that engineers would watch and understand immediately. This was legitimate. This was real. This worked. He uploaded the video to an engineering forum frequented by industry professionals. He did not attach Elena's name. He simply showed the work. Within 24 hours, there were 127 responses. Within 48 hours, there were 400. Automotive engineers, mechanical engineers, industry professionals were mesmerized. The design was decades ahead of current industry standards. The engineering was elegant. The concept was revolutionary. One response came from Marcus Wellington, CEO of Wellington Motorsports. The email was brief. Who designed this engine? I need to know. Thomas responded. The designer prefers privacy at this time. The design was created in 2003. Marcus Wellington called within an hour. This design, Marcus said without preamble. This is not new to me. I've been searching for this concept for 27 years. Someone showed me preliminary sketches of a similar concept in 1996. The engineer who designed it told me she was going to revolutionize automotive engineering. Then I never heard from her again. Did you know her? Thomas's hands were shaking. Yes, he said. I knew her very well. Who was she? Her name was Elena Maria Santos Rivera. She died 3 years ago. There was silence on the other end of the line. The valve timing mechanism, Marcus said finally. It was her idea. All of it, Thomas said. She designed it. I rebuilt it. I need to see the documentation, Marcus said. I need to verify the timeline, the source, the legitimacy. Thomas sent him everything. Elena's sketchbooks photographed. Isabella's compilation of Elena's technical notes. The test results. The proof that the engine worked exactly as Elena had specified it would work. The evidence that a woman named Elena Maria Santos Rivera had imagined the future of automotive engineering while sitting at a kitchen table, raising 2 children, being the person her family needed her to be. Marcus Wellington called back the next day. "I need to hire you," he said, "to rebuild this engine for commercial application. I need to put it in vehicles. I need to prove it works at scale. And I need to credit Elena for the design. The world needs to know who created this." "She's dead," Thomas said. "Then the world needs to know her name," Marcus said. "She deserves that. The industry deserves to know what it lost when she left." 6 months later, Wellington Motorsports unveiled the Elena engine, a commercial variant of the design that Elena had created in 2003. The technical specifications were featured in every major automotive engineering publication. The story of Elena, the engineer who left the industry to raise her children, who kept designing in notebooks, whose vision had finally been recognized decades later, was featured in articles, interviews, documentaries. The recognition came with a particular pain for Thomas. Elena should have been there to see it. Elena should have been alive to accept the accolades, to be celebrated, to know that her sacrifice had meant something, that her work had mattered, that she had been right to keep designing even when no one was listening. But the recognition also came with a kind of vindication. Elena's story, tragic as it was, became a catalyst for change. Engineering firms began examining their policies around maternity leave, flexible work, the support systems that would have allowed Elena to continue her career. Women engineers began telling their own stories, the ways they had been forced to choose between ambition and motherhood, the ways their genius had been sidelined, the ways the industry had lost brilliance, because it could not accommodate the needs of women who were also mothers. The Wellington Motorsports Foundation, founded by Marcus Wellington, created the Elena Rivera Fellowship, a program that provided funding, mentorship, and support to women engineers, particularly mothers who wanted to continue their technical work while raising families. At the announcement event, Thomas stood with Isabella. Isabella was now 16, and she had made a decision. She was going to study automotive engineering. She was going to spend her life working with engines, continuing her mother's legacy, making sure that the brilliance that Elena had imagined would continue to shape the future. Marcus Wellington approached them. "Your mother would be proud," Marcus said to Isabella. "My mother was always brilliant," Isabella said. "She was just never allowed to show it. I'm going to show it." Thomas felt something shift inside his chest. Not quite healing, because grief does not heal in that way, but transformation. The pain of Elena's death had been transmuted into action, into legacy, into the continuation of her work through the next generation. That evening, Thomas sat alone in the garage. The workbench was empty now. The sketchbooks were being preserved in a climate-controlled archive. A permanent record of Elena's engineering genius. The engine that had rebuilt was now being mass-produced by Wellington Motorsports, about to be installed in vehicles that would drive millions of miles, carrying millions of people, solving millions of problems exactly as Elena had imagined. He thought about the 14th of March 2003 notation in the sketchbook. If this works, everything changes. She had been right. Everything had changed. Not in the way she had imagined. Not with her at the center, not with her receiving the recognition in her lifetime, but in a way that was maybe more profound. Her work had changed the industry. Her story had changed the conversation about women in engineering. Her legacy was reshaping the world she had left behind. Thomas opened his phone and looked at a photograph of Elena young, alive, sitting at a drawing table, bent over a sketchbook, mid-design, caught in the moment of creating. "You were right," he said to the photograph. "Everything did change. You just had to wait a little longer to see it." And in the quiet garage, with the fluorescent lights humming their 1,970 seconds hum, Thomas Rivera sat with his wife's memory, knowing that she had been brilliant, that the world had finally understood it, and that the grief that had carried him through 3 years of rebuilding her engine had transformed into something that looked like peace.